Tonight, we are stepping into a Victorian house where very little happens. There are no dramatic events here, no famous conversations, no important moments. Only quiet rooms, steady routines, and spaces designed to remain unchanged. This is a calm history story about Victorian interiors, rooms where almost nothing happened, and that is exactly the point. Welcome, and thank you for choosing this video. This is a slow voice-only history story, created for sleep, relaxation, and quiet listening. There is no music in this video. No sound effects, only calm narration, meant to be played softly as you rest. You don't need to focus on every word. You can simply let the story continue in the background, as your attention drifts and your thoughts slow. If this is your first time here, you are very welcome. This channel shares long.com history stories designed to help you unwind, often focusing on everyday life, quiet routines, and moments where nothing much happens. If you find this style helpful for rest or sleep, you may consider subscribing. Subscribing quietly supports the channel and allows these long, peaceful stories to continue. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed, and to those returning to listen again. Now, make yourself comfortable. You can close your eyes if you wish, or simply listen without paying attention. We will begin by entering the Victorian house slowly, and letting each room reveal itself in its own time. A Victorian house was never meant to be loud. From the moment one stepped inside, there was a sense that the building itself preferred stillness. The walls stood firm and unmoving, built not to surprise or impress, but to endure. These houses were not places of excitement. They were places of order, repetition, and calm routines that unfolded day after day, often without variation. In the Victorian era, the home was not designed for entertainment as we understand it today. There were no glowing screens, no background noise meant to fill silence. Instead, silence itself was considered proper. A quiet house suggested respectability, discipline, and control. Sounds were allowed, but only those that belonged naturally to the home-measured footsteps, the soft closing of doors, the gentle rustle of fabric, or the distant ticking of a clock marking time without urgency. The structure of a Victorian house reflected this mindset. Each room had a purpose, and that purpose rarely changed. A space intended for sitting was meant for sitting, not wandering. A room prepared for guests remained prepared even when no guests arrived. Movement through the house followed predictable paths, and furniture stayed where it had always been. Nothing needed rearranging. Nothing demanded attention. Light entered the house. Carefully. Windows were dressed with curtains that filtered brightness rather than inviting it freely. During the day, sunlight soft as it passed through layers of fabric. At night, lamps offered a gentle glow that reached only as far as necessary. Corners remained in shadow, not neglected, but quietly present. The Victorian house was not a place of constant activity. Much of the day passed with rooms standing still, occupied only by air and memory. A parlor might remain untouched for hours. A hallway might wait patiently between footsteps. Chairs held their positions. Tables bore no clutter beyond what was customary. These interiors were composed, restrained, and predictable. This predictability was comforting. People knew where everything belonged. They knew how each room would appear at any given time. There was no rush to change or improve what already worked. The house was a steady companion to daily life, offering structure without asking for engagement. In many ways, the Victorian interior was an extension of the era's values. Calm behavior, controlled expression, and respect for routine were reflected in every surface. Decorations were chosen carefully and rarely replaced. A framed picture might hang in the same spot for decades. A cabinet might hold the same objects year after year. Familiarity was valued more than novelty. Even empty rooms carried meaning. An unoccupied sitting room was not wasted space. It was a room fulfilling its purpose simply by being ready. Readiness itself was enough. There was no need for constant use to justify existence. As one moved slowly through a Victorian house, there was a sense of being guided rather than invited. Doorways framed transitions gently. Staircases rose with patience, encouraging steady steps. Nothing was designed to hurry the body or stimulate the mind. The house seemed to say that time would pass regardless, and there was no need to interfere. Sound behaved differently inside these homes. Voices were conversations paused often. Silence was not uncomfortable. It was expected. When nothing happened, that absence of activity felt natural rather than empty. The house held space for quiet without demanding explanation. This was a world where interiors mattered deeply, yet asked for very little. Rooms were not stages for performance, but containers for routine. They supported life without drawing attention to themselves. They allowed people to exist without constant stimulation. In the evenings, the house settled even further. Lamps were lit one by one, curtains were drawn carefully. The day retreated, and the interiors prepared for rest. Furniture remained where it belonged. Objects returned to their places. Order was restored, even if it had never truly been disturbed. The Victorian house did not chase comfort through luxury alone. Comfort came from consistency, from knowing that tomorrow, the rooms would look the same as they did today, that the hallway would wait as it always had, that the sitting room would remain composed, whether entered or not. This steadiness made the house a quiet anchor in a changing world. Outside, cities expanded, industries grew, and schedules shifted. Inside, the rooms remained patient. They did not react. They did not demand adaptation. They simply existed, offering familiarity and calm. As we begin this slow journey through Victorian interiors, there is no need to imagine dramatic events or meaningful moments. Nothing important needs to happen here. The value lies in stillness, in spaces that functioned best when left undisturbed. In the chapters that follow, we will move gently from room to room, not to observe action, but to notice absence. We will step into spaces that were carefully arranged for everyday life, and then allowed to rest. These are rooms where almost nothing happened. And that was exactly the point. For now, it is enough to remain at the threshold of the Victorian house, aware of its quiet presence, its calm order, and its enduring patience. The interiors are waiting, not for excitement, but simply for our slow attention. When you're ready, reply with "Continue with Chapter 2, and I'll proceed in the same tone and depth. If you want slower pacing, simpler language, or more repetition for sleep, tell me now and I'll adjust before continuing." The front hallway of a Victorian house was not a place to remain for long. It was a space designed for passing through, for pausing briefly, and most of all, for waiting. This hallway was often narrow, especially in townhouses, and slightly wider in larger homes. It was rarely decorated for comfort. Instead, it served a practical and symbolic role. The front hallway marked the boundary between the outside world and the carefully ordered interior beyond. When the front door closed, the hallway absorbed the transition quietly. Outdoor noise faded. Footsteps soft. Voices lowered naturally. The house signaled that behavior should change here, becoming slower and more restrained. Walls in the hallway were usually plain, sometimes painted in darker tones that resisted visible wear. Wallpaper, if present, was subtle and repetitive in pattern. Nothing was meant to draw the eye for too long. This was not a room for observation, but for brief presence. Along one wall, coat hooks were often fixed at even intervals. Hats, cloaks, and scarves rested there in predictable arrangements. These items rarely changed places. Each family member used the same hook, day after day, season after season. Over time, the arrangement became familiar, almost invisible. Umbrella stands were common near the door, holding walking sticks and umbrellas, upright and still. These objects waited quietly between uses, drying slowly untouched for hours or days. They made no demand for attention. The floor of the hallway was usually covered with durable material. Tiled patterns or simple rugs absorbed dirt from outside and protected the rest of the home. Rugs lay flat and unmoving, their edges carefully aligned. No one adjusted them unnecessarily. Light in the hallway was modest. During the day, it arrived indirectly from nearby rooms or through frosted glass panels in the front door. At night, a single lamp or gas fixture provided enough illumination to see where one was standing, but no more. Shadows were allowed to remain. The front hallway was often the first place a visitor would wait. Waiting was expected and accepted. A visitor might stand quietly, hands folded, listening to the distant sounds of movement deeper within the house. There was no impatience, Time in the hallway moved slowly and evenly. This waiting space encouraged stillness. There were few places to sit, if any. Chairs were not always provided. Standing quietly was part of the experience. It reminded visitors that entry into the home was controlled and deliberate. The hallway also served as a place of brief reflection. Those about to leave the house paused here to gather belongings, straighten clothing, and adjust their posture. Movements were small and careful. There was no rushing, even when one was late. Mirrors sometimes appeared in the hallway, but they were modest in size. Their purpose was functional rather than decorative. A quick glance was sufficient. No one lingered. Sound behaved differently in this space. The hallway carried echoes softly, but not loudly. Footsteps were noticeable but restrained. Doors closed gently. Voices rarely rose beyond a quiet tone. Because the hallway connected the outside to the inner rooms, it absorbed traces of both. It smelled faintly of coats, polished wood, and the air brought in from outdoors. These scents blended and faded without effort. Despite its importance, the hallway rarely changed. Decorations were minimal and remained in place for long periods. A small table, if present, held only a few items. Perhaps a tray for letters or a bowl for keys. These objects were returned to their places reliably. The hallway was not meant to be memorable. Its success lay in its predictability. One always knew what to expect when stepping into it. This familiarity created comfort without excitement. Children were taught early how to behave in this space. Running was discouraged. Loud talking was corrected. The hallway set the tone for the entire house, reminding everyone that calm behavior was preferred. During much of the day, the hallway stood empty. It waited patiently between uses, unchanged and undisturbed. Dust settled slowly. Light shifted slightly as hours passed. Nothing required intervention. In the evening, the hallway prepared quietly for the night. Coats returned to their hooks. Shoes were aligned neatly. Lamps were lit and then left alone. The space returned to readiness, even if no one planned to leave again before morning. The front hallway did not offer comfort in the form of softness or warmth. Instead, it offered clarity. It told everyone where they were and how they should behave. It did not invite lingering, but it did not hurry anyone either. It existed to hold brief moments' arrivals, departures, pauses between conversations. It absorbed these moments without retaining them. Once they passed, the hallway returned to stillness. In many Victorian homes, the hallway was one of the least personal spaces, yet it was deeply familiar. Everyone passed through it countless times, often without noticing it at all, and perhaps that was its greatest success. The front hallway did exactly what it was meant to do, quietly and consistently. It asked for no attention and received none. It waited, always ready, always unchanged. As we move deeper into the house, leaving the hallway behind, there is no sense of loss. The hallway remains where it is, patient and still, prepared to receive the next quiet pause whenever it comes. The formal sitting room in a Victorian house existed more in theory than in practice. It was a room prepared carefully and then left largely untouched. Its purpose was not daily comfort, but readiness. Everything within it suggested restraint, patience, and the idea that nothing should be disturbed without reason. This room was often located near the front of the house, separated from everyday activity. It was meant to be seen, but not often entered. When its door remained closed, which it frequently did, the room rested quietly behind it. Furniture in the formal sitting room was arranged with intention and then left in place. Chairs were aligned neatly. Sofas were positioned to face one another in balanced symmetry. Small tables stood between them, empty or holding a single object placed there long ago. Many of these furnishings were covered. Fabric drapes or protective covers shielded upholstery from dust and sunlight. These covers were removed only on special occasions and then replaced carefully afterward. Most of the time, they remained untouched, smoothing the room into stillness. The floor was usually covered with a rug chosen for its pattern rather than its softness. Chairs rested precisely upon it, legs aligned as they had always been. No one shifted them casually. Movement in this room was deliberate and minimal. Light entered the formal sitting room politely. Curtains were arranged to filter brightness rather than welcome it fully. During the day, sunlight soft as it crossed the room, touching surfaces gently without drawing attention to itself. The walls often held framed artwork or photographs. These items were selected carefully and rarely changed. Over time, they blended into the room so completely that they became part of its structure rather than decorations. Objects in the formal sitting room did not invite interaction. Books, if present, were chosen for appearance rather than frequent reading. Decorative items remained exactly where they had been placed. Even the air felt preserved. This room encouraged quiet behavior. Voices lowered naturally. Movement slowed. Sitting here required a kind of stillness that discouraged restlessness. There was no sense of urgency or entertainment. When guests were received in this room, conversations were polite and measured. Long pauses were common and acceptable. Silence did not require explanation. The room supported it effortlessly. Most days, however, the formal sitting room remained unoccupied. Hours passed without footsteps crossing its floor. Dust settled slowly, barely noticeable. The room waited without impatience. Children were rarely allowed inside. It was not a space for play or expression. Its value lay in remaining unchanged, a representation of order and respectability rather than use. The formal sitting room was also a space of visual discipline. Nothing stood out. Colors were muted, patterns repeated gently. The room offered no surprises. In the evenings, the room remained largely as it had been throughout the day. Lamps were sometimes lit, even if no one entered, simply to maintain routine. Their soft glow did little to disturb the calm. When the door was closed, the formal sitting room existed independently of the rest of the house. Life continued elsewhere, while this space remained still, unaffected by time or activity. There was comfort in knowing that such a room existed. Even if it was rarely used, its presence provided reassurance. It suggested that everything was in order, that there was a place reserved for formality should it ever be required. The lack of activity in this room was not a failure. It was its success. A room that remained unchanged demonstrated control and permanence. As days turned into months, and months into years, the formal sitting room held its position without complaint. It did not demand attention. It did not adapt. It simply waited. This room reminded those who passed by its closed door that not every space needed to be active. Some spaces existed to remain still, offering quiet certainty in a changing world. When we leave the formal sitting room behind, we do so gently without disturbance. The furniture remains aligned. The air settles back into place. Nothing has been altered. The room continues its quiet purpose, unchanged and undisturbed, ready to remain exactly as it is for as long as necessary. The parlor was a room meant for presence rather than activity. Unlike the formal sitting room, which was rarely entered, the parlor existed to be used but only in a measured and restrained way. It was the space where visitors might be received. Conversations might occur, and time might pass quietly without any clear purpose. The parlor was not designed for comfort in the modern sense. Chairs were firm rather than soft. Seating encouraged upright posture. Cushions were modest, offering support without inviting rest. This was not a room for reclining or relaxation, but for calm attentiveness. Furniture in the parlor followed established arrangements. Chairs faced one another across small tables. Nothing was placed at random. Each piece had a specific position that remained unchanged for long periods of time. On Searankid, the room rarely shifted. The walls often carried subtle decoration wallpaper with repeating patterns, chosen to be pleasing but not distracting. Colors were muted and familiar. Nothing in the parlor demanded focus. The room encouraged the eyes to settle rather than wander. Light entered gently, filtered through curtains that soft brightness. During the day, the parlor remained evenly lit, without strong contrast. Shadows rested quietly in corners. At night, lamps provided a calm glow, illuminating faces without harshness. Conversation in the parlor followed unspoken rules. Voices were kept low. Words were chosen carefully. Topics were familiar and safe. There was no urgency to fill silence. Pauses were common and accepted. These pauses were not awkward. They were expected. Silence allowed thoughts to settle and attention to rest. The parlor did not rush conversation forward. It allowed it to move slowly. Or not at all. Tea was often served in this room, though even this was done without haste. Cups were placed carefully on saucers. Movements were small and deliberate. Sounds remained soft. The quiet clink of porcelain, the gentle pour of tea. Between exchanges of words, there were moments when nothing happened at all. People sat, hands folded, eyes resting on familiar surroundings. The parlor supported this stillness without discomfort. When guests departed, the room returned quickly to its resting state. Chairs were returned to their exact positions. Cups were removed. Surfaces were cleared. Order was restored with little effort. The parlor spent much of its time unoccupied. Hours passed with no voices and no movement. Light shifted gradually across the room. Air remained still. The furniture waited. This waiting was not empty. It was purposeful. The parlor existed to be ready, not to be busy. Readiness itself was enough. Children were permitted in the parlor more often than in the formal sitting room, but their behavior was closely guided. They were taught to sit quietly, to speak softly, and to move carefully. The room shaped behavior through expectation rather than instruction. The parlor also reflected the rhythm of the household. It was most active in the late afternoon or early evening, when visits were socially acceptable. Outside these hours, it rested quietly. Objects within the parlor remained consistent. Decorative items were rarely replaced. A clock on the mantel marked time steadily, its ticking gentle and predictable. Flowers, if present, were simple and understated. Nothing in the parlor suggested excitement. It was not meant to entertain or stimulate. Instead, it provided a calm setting for modest interaction. Over time, the parlor became deeply familiar to those who used it. Its arrangement, its light, and its atmosphere were known without thought. Entering the room required no adjustment. The parlor did not compete with other rooms for attention. It accepted its role quietly. When used, it supported polite presence. When unused, it rested without complaint. Evenings often brought a sense of closure to the parlor. Lamps were extinguished. Curtains were adjusted. The room settled into darkness, unchanged and complete. As night deepened, the parlor remained exactly as it had been throughout the day. Nothing required attention. It was already as it should be. The parlor was a room where conversation moved slowly, where pauses were welcome, and where nothing important needed to happen. Its calm presence reflected a way of life that valued restraint and predictability. When we leave the parlor behind, it remains still, ready to receive quiet conversation again whenever it is needed. Until then, it waits patiently, unchanged and undisturbed. The study was a room defined by quiet purpose. Unlike other rooms in the Victorian house, the study was not meant for conversation or social presence. It existed for solitary activity, for thinking that unfolded slowly and without interruption. It was a room where time was allowed to stretch without notice. The study was often modest in size. It did not require openness or light in abundance. Its comfort came from enclosure rather than space. Walls felt closer, creating a sense of containment that encouraged focus and calm. At the center of the study stood a desk, solid and unmoving. It was usually made of dark wood, chosen for durability rather than decoration. The desk faced a wall or a window, depending on the household, but its position rarely changed. Once decided, on the desk rested papers arranged in careful stacks. These papers were not hurried documents. They were letters, records, notes, and accounts meant to be read slowly and written with care. Ink dried naturally, without blotting or haste. Pens were placed deliberately, often returned to the same spot after use. Inkwells remained capped when not needed. Everything in the study had a designated place, and returning items to that place was part of the routine. Bookshelves lined one or more walls, holding volumes that were familiar rather than novel. These books were not read quickly. They were consulted, revisited, and sometimes simply left unopened, serving as quiet companions. The study encouraged a steady pace. Writing took time. Reading took time. Even sitting at the desk required stillness. There was no background noise to distract attention. Silence was part of the room's function. Light entered the study carefully. A window, if present, admitted a measured amount of daylight. Curtains filtered glare, allowing only a soft illumination. In the evening, a single lamp provided enough light for reading without brightening the entire room. The air in the study was often still. Movement was minimal. Chairs were firm and upright, encouraging proper posture rather than comfort. Long periods of sitting were common, marked by occasional pauses rather than frequent shifts. This was not a room for interruption. Family members understood that the study required quiet. Doors were closed gently. Voices remained low outside. The study maintained its separation from the rest of the household. Much of the time, the study stood empty. Hours passed without anyone entering. The desk waited. Papers remained undisturbed. Dust settled slowly, unnoticed. When someone did enter, the room accepted their presence without change. The study did not respond or adapt. It simply continued to exist, as it always had. Writing in the study was often repetitive. Lists were made. Accounts were balanced. Letters followed familiar formats. There was comfort in this repetition, in knowing what was expected. The study did not invite creativity in the modern sense. It encouraged clarity, order, and consistency. Thought was meant to unfold gradually, without pressure. The sounds within the study were subtle. The scratch of pen on paper, the quiet turn of a page, the faint ticking of a clock marking time evenly. These sounds blended into the silence rather than breaking it. Even when occupied, the study felt calm and reserved. It did not absorb energy or emotion. It remained neutral, providing structure rather than stimulation. At the end of the day, the study returned to stillness easily. Papers were stacked. Pens were set down. Lamps were extinguished. Nothing was left unfinished, because there was no urgency to finish. The study did not measure productivity by speed. It measured it by completion and order. Tasks could wait. Time was available. This room reflected a belief that thought deserved space and patience, that writing did not need to be rushed. That silence supported clarity. As night approached, the study rested completely. It did not change its appearance. It did not close itself off. It simply remained, waiting for the next quiet period of use. Leaving the study behind required no adjustment. The door closed softly. The room remained unchanged, holding its papers, its books, and its calm purpose. The study was a place where nothing dramatic occurred. It existed for steady work and unhurried reflection. In its stillness, it offered a quiet balance to the rest of the house. The dining room was a place where time slowed naturally. It was not a room of celebration or excitement, but one of routine and order. Meals taken here followed established patterns, repeated day after day with little variation. This repetition brought comfort rather than boredom. The dining table occupied the center of the room, solid and steady. It was built to last, with legs that did not shift and a surface that showed little wear. Once placed, the table remained in the same position for years. Chairs were arranged evenly around the table, each one identical to the next. They were not designed for comfort beyond necessity. Sitting upright was expected, and long periods of rest were not encouraged. The table was set carefully, even for ordinary meals. Plates were placed in familiar positions. Cutlery followed exact arrangements. Glasses stood where they always had. There was reassurance in knowing where everything belonged. Before a meal, the dining room waited quietly. Light entered through tall windows, softened by curtains that reduced glare. Shadows rested gently beneath the table and chairs, undisturbed. When the household gathered, movement was calm and deliberate. Chairs were pulled back softly. Sitting was done without haste. No one rushed to begin. Conversation at the table was measured. Voices remained low. Topics were familiar and safe. Long pauses occurred naturally between exchanges. Silence was not uncomfortable. Meals progressed steadily. Each bite was taken without hurry. There was no need to finish quickly. The rhythm of eating matched the calm atmosphere of the room. Serving dishes were passed slowly. Hands moved carefully. Sounds were minimal, quiet clink of utensils, the soft placement of plates. Nothing disrupted the stillness. The dining room did not encourage lingering after meals. Once finished, chairs were pushed back gently. Plates were cleared. The room returned to its waiting state. Outside mealtimes, the dining room stood empty. The table remained set or partially cleared, depending on the time of day. Chairs rested where they belonged. Nothing changed. The room itself did not seek attention. Decorations were simple. A sideboard or cabinet held dishes that were rarely used. These items remained untouched most of the time. Light shifted gradually throughout the day, moving across the table and chairs without notice. The dining room accepted this change quietly. Special occasions did not alter the room dramatically. Extra dishes might appear, candles might be lit, yet event and behavior remained restrained and orderly. The dining room supported routine above all else. It did not adapt to mood or emotion. It provided consistency, day after day. Children learned proper behavior here early. Sitting quietly, eating carefully, speaking politely. The room itself reinforced these lessons without words. In the evening, lamps replaced daylight, casting a soft, even glow. The room felt enclosed and calm. Meals taken at this time were especially quiet. After the final meal, the dining room settled completely. The table was cleared. Chairs were aligned. Curtains were adjusted. Lamps were extinguished. Darkness returned the room to stillness. Nothing remained unfinished. There was no need for change. The dining room did not reflect urgency or appetite. It reflected patience. Meals were moments of pause rather than interruption. This room existed to mark time gently. Morning, midday, and evening passed through it without disruption. The routine remained. When no one entered for hours or days, the dining room waited without complaint. It did not require a presence to fulfill its purpose. The dining room was a place where nourishment was taken calmly and without emphasis. It did not celebrate food. It respected it quietly. Leaving the dining room behind felt natural. The door closed softly. The room remained exactly as it had been, ready for the next unhurried meal. The hallway was not a destination. It was a space designed for movement, yet it rarely held attention. People passed through it without stopping, often without noticing it at all. Its purpose was simple and unchanged: to connect one room to another. Victorian hallways were long and narrow, emphasizing direction rather than comfort. Floors were firm underfoot, usually wood or stone, chosen for durability rather than warmth. Rugs, if present, were placed carefully and seldom moved. The hallway did not invite lingering. There were no chairs, no tables meant for use. Any furniture that existed was minimal and practical, such as a small stand or a narrow console against the wall. Walls in the hallway were often lined with artwork or framed photographs. These images were familiar, seen repeatedly over years. They blended into the background, no longer demanding attention. Light in the hallway was steady but subdued. Windows, if present, were positioned to provide basic illumination rather than brightness. Lamps were placed at intervals, casting even pools of light along the floor. Footsteps echoed softly in the hallway, but the sound was not disruptive. It was expected and accepted. The hallway absorbed movement without reacting to it. Doors opened and closed along its length. Each door led to a different room with a different purpose. The hallway itself remained neutral, unchanged by what lay beyond. Time passed differently here. People moved through quickly or slowly, depending on the hour. Yet the hallway itself did not reflect this variation. It remained constant. During the day, the hallway experienced brief moments of activity followed by long stretches of quiet. In the early morning, footsteps were measured and restrained. In the evening, movement slowed further. Children learned early that the hallway was not a place for play. Running was discouraged. Voices were lowered. The space demanded respect through its narrowness and simplicity. Decorations in the hallway were chosen for endurance. Wallpaper patterns repeated softly. Paint colors were muted. Nothing overwhelmed the senses. Mirrors were sometimes placed along the walls, reflecting light rather than encouraging inspection. People passed by their reflections without pause. The hallway did not hold memories in the same way other rooms did. It was not associated with conversation, work, or rest. It existed between moments rather than containing them. At night, the hallway became especially still. Lamps remained lit or dimmed, guiding movement without fully illuminating the space. Shadows settled quietly along the walls. Footsteps at night were softer, slower. Doors closed gently. The hallway witnessed these transitions without involvement. When no one moved through it, the hallway waited. Dust settled lightly. Air remained undisturbed. Nothing required attention. The hallway connected private and public spaces. Bedrooms, studies, parlors, all were accessible through it. Yet the hallway itself belonged to none of them. It did not express personality or mood. It did not adapt. It remained a constant passageway, unchanged year after year. Even when decorated for special occasions, the hallway's role did not change. It remained a route, not a place. The hallway existed to be crossed, not occupied. Its success lay in its invisibility. As people moved from one room to another, the hallway supported these transitions quietly. It did not interrupt thought or conversation. When the house slept, the hallway rested fully. No footsteps passed. No doors opened. The space returned to complete stillness. The hallway held the structure of the house together without asking for recognition. It connected, supported, and remained unnoticed. Leaving the hallway behind required no adjustment. It continued to exist, ready to guide movement again whenever needed. The bedroom was a space of quiet stillness, even during the day. It was rarely used until the evening or early morning, yet it existed constantly, prepared and waiting. The bed remained neatly made, with sheets tucked tightly and pillows arranged in orderly fashion. The room's very arrangement suggested patience and calm. Nothing in the bedroom required action unless it was chosen deliberately. Curtains filtered the daylight softly, allowing light to enter in muted streams. Sunlight touched the floor and walls gently, never harshly. Shadows rested quietly in corners. The air felt calm, suspended, as though the room itself were breathing slowly. Furniture was arranged thoughtfully. A small dresser held folded clothing, kept in neat piles. A wardrobe remained closed, its contents carefully preserved. Chairs and small tables stood in their positions, undisturbed and unchanged. Each object had a purpose, yet required no immediate use. The bedroom invited nothing hurried. Even walking across it demanded soft, deliberate steps. Footfalls were absorbed by the floor or the occasional rug, leaving no echo to disturb the quiet. The room remained calm and patient, regardless of who entered. Sound was minimal. The gentle rustle of fabric, a chair adjusted slightly, the soft click of a door, these were the only noises allowed. Silence was not empty but expected. It was a presence that filled the space with a subtle rhythm of calm. During the day, the bedroom often remained completely unoccupied. Sunlight shifted slowly, changing angles on the bed and walls. Yet the room itself did not notice. It existed as it always had, patient and steady. Even dust settled gradually, without intrusion. Small details reflected the careful nature of the room. A bedside table held a single lamp or a few personal items, placed with intention. Shelves might carry books, but they were consulted rarely. Even objects that were moved were returned quickly to their original positions, maintaining the order of the room. The bedroom also encouraged quiet reflection. Those who entered it could pause for a moment, observing the stillness, noticing the shapes and textures, and allowing their minds to rest. It offered no urgency, no demands, only presence. Children rarely entered the bedroom during the day. If they did, they were taught to step softly, to respect the order, and to leave the space as they found it. The room served as a subtle teacher, demonstrating restraint without words. Even when someone used the bedroom for dressing or preparation, the pace remained slow and deliberate. Clothing was removed or replaced with care. Movements were minimal, thoughtful, and unhurried. Nothing happened abruptly. The walls often carried minimal decoration, chosen for subtlety rather than attention. Paint or wallpaper was muted, soft in color. Pictures, if present, were familiar and repetitive. Nothing drew the eye unnecessarily. The room maintained calm not only through action, but also through design. As daylight moved across the room, light shifted gently, touching different objects in turn. The bed, the dresser, the small tableau received a slow, quiet illumination. The shadows followed, moving without urgency. Evenings would bring changes, but during the day, the bedroom rested in preparedness. It waited quietly for the time when sleep or night tasks would call its occupants. Until then, it maintained perfect stillness. The bedroom did not demand attention, nor did it invite excitement. It existed for gentle comfort, readiness, and calm. Its purpose was fulfilled in simply being present. Leaving the bedroom during daylight hours required no ceremony. The door could close softly. The bed remained neatly made. Chairs, tables, and objects stayed exactly where they had been. The room continued to wait, unchanged, ready for its next moment of use. The bedroom, like many other rooms in the Victorian house, showed that calm and order could exist without action. It reminded those who passed through or observed it that stillness was not emptiness, but intention. And so, the bedroom remained, day after day, patient, orderly, and quiet, offering a space of rest even when it was unused, a room where time could pass gently and nothing need happen at all. Dressing rooms and wardrobes were spaces of quiet preparation. These rooms were designed to hold clothing in perfect order, ready for daily use or special occasions. They were not rooms of excitement or display, but rooms of careful arrangement and patience. Every garment had a place, and every object was returned to it. In the dressing room, shelves and drawers were aligned precisely. Folded clothing rested in neat piles, each stack arranged by type, size, or season. Fabrics were carefully smoothed, avoiding wrinkles or creases. This attention to detail reflected the household's respect for routine and order. Wardrobes, often tall and closed with solid doors, contained garments hung evenly on hangers. Coats, jackets, dresses, and shirts followed a predictable sequence. Items were rarely moved without purpose, and when used, they were returned quickly to their designated spot. Shoes were stored in pairs, placed side by side on shelves or in boxers. Boots were cleaned and set upright, standing patiently until next required. Accessories such as hats, gloves, and scarves were organized with similar care, each in its specific location. The room itself encouraged slow, deliberate movements. Those dressing here were expected to handle clothing with care. Actions were minimal, purposeful, and respectful. Nothing was hurried, and nothing was careless. Light in the dressing room was soft, allowing occupants to see clearly without creating glare. Sunlight filtered through curtains or small windows, touching folded fabrics and polished surfaces gently. Shadows shifted slowly throughout the day, moving across drawers, shelves, and hanging clothes. Even when unoccupied, the room maintained its order. Clothing rested untouched. Drawers remained closed. Wardrobe doors stood firmly shut. Dust settled gradually, unnoticed, on shelves and surfaces. The room waited patiently, always prepared for use. Mirrors, if present, reflected light calmly and without emphasis. They offered a place to observe appearance quietly, without distraction or urgency. Standing before a mirror required minimal movement, a gentle pause to ensure neatness and propriety. The dressing room also encouraged routine. Seasonal clothing was rotated carefully. Heavy coats were brought forward in winter, while lighter garments returned in spring. These changes occurred slowly, deliberately, and with forethought, reinforcing the sense of order in the household. Children entering the room learned patience. They observed the way garments were handled and arranged. They practiced folding or hanging under careful guidance, understanding that the room's purpose was calm preparation rather than play or haste. Even minor objects, such as buttons, ribbons, or ties, were kept in small boxes or drawers. Each had a specific location. Their presence contributed to the overall sense of stability. Nothing was left to chance. The wardrobe and dressing room were also spaces of reflection. Time moved slowly as garments rested in silence. Each item told a story of repeated use, careful maintenance, and intentional arrangement. Yet no action was required to appreciate this rhythm. The air in the room was quiet, carrying only faint hints of fabric, polish, and occasionally the faint scent of sunlight on clothing. Sounds were limited to the soft click of drawers, the gentle sliding of hangers, or the quiet movement of a person choosing an outfit. During the day, these rooms were rarely the center of activity. They existed in support of other spaces, the bedroom, the parlor, or the study. Yet they maintained an importance of their own. They were necessary, prepared, and steady, whether used or empty. Evenings brought no sudden changes. Garments were returned to their places. Drawers were closed gently. The room restored itself to readiness, awaiting the next morning or next required use. Nothing had been lost. Nothing had been hurried. The dressing room and wardrobe demonstrate the Victorian value of care, through repetition. Calmness and order were their guiding principles. They reflected a life lived slowly, deliberately, and without unnecessary disturbance. Exiting the room required no adjustment. The door could close softly. Shelves remained as they were. Clothes rested where they belonged. The space remained unchanged, patient and ready. In these quiet rooms, we see how small, deliberate attention to daily necessities could create peace. Even the simple act of clothing and preparing oneself was given a gentle rhythm, repeated day after day, quietly supporting the household's sense of calm. Dressing rooms and wardrobes, though often overlooked, held their purpose quietly and steadfastly. They were rooms where nothing dramatic occurred, yet everything was maintained perfectly, patiently, and without rush. The sewing or workroom was a space of quiet diligence. It was not a room of excitement or sudden activity, but a place where small, careful tasks unfolded slowly. The room existed to hold tools, materials, and hands at work, yet it demanded patience above all else. Time in this room passed gently, often unnoticed, as motions repeated steadily and without urgency. Tables were central to the workroom. They held fabrics, threads, needles, and other materials. Surfaces were organized. Every item returned to its place after use. There was no clutter, no unnecessary movement. Even the smallest tools had designated spots. The room itself encouraged careful attention. Light entered the room softly. Windows filtered daylight, allowing it to touch tables and materials without harshness. Shadows moved slowly across the floor, shifting as the sun passed through the day. Lamps provided illumination in the evening, casting a calm, even glow. The workroom supported repetitive motion. Sewing, mending, knitting, or embroidery were performed slowly and deliberately. Each stitch followed a consistent rhythm. Hands moved with purpose, guided by habit rather than speed. The work itself was soothing, producing quiet satisfaction through repetition. Sounds were minimal. The soft scratch of a needle, the gentle rustle of fabric, the quiet click of scissors, these were the room's only noises. Even these sounds blended seamlessly with the stillness, becoming part of the background rather than interrupting it. Materials were arranged thoughtfully. Spools of thread rested on stands, sorted by color and size. Fabrics were folded neatly, stacked in piles or stored in cabinets. Patterns, scissors, pins, and other tools had specific places. Everything was orderly, awaiting its next use. The sewing or workroom taught patience. Children who entered the space were instructed in slow, careful motions. They learned to handle fabric gently, to follow patterns methodically, and to respect the rhythm of work without hurrying. The room itself reinforced these lessons through calm consistency. Even when unoccupied, the room maintained a sense of purpose. Tables remained cleared of clutter. Materials stayed in their places, and light continued to shift softly through windows. Dust settled gradually, unhurried and unnoticed. The room existed quietly, prepared for the next period of work. Time in the workroom had a gentle structure. Morning light encouraged steady activity, while the afternoon brought a more relaxed pace. Evenings were calm and still. There was no pressure to complete tasks. The rhythm of the day guided the work naturally. The room also reflected the patience of those who used it. Work was performed slowly to ensure quality, to avoid mistakes, and to respect the materials. There was satisfaction in the care itself, in the continuity of action rather than in rapid results. Objects in the room were simple and purposeful. Chairs were sturdy, supporting proper posture for long periods of activity. Tables were broad enough to hold necessary tools. Storage remained practical, avoiding unnecessary decoration. The simplicity of design reinforced calm and order. The workroom connected subtly to the rest of the house. It was not a public space, nor was it a room for display. It existed quietly alongside bedrooms, parlors, and studies, fulfilling its role without demanding attention. Its presence was steady, reliable, and enduring. Evenings in the workroom brought no sudden change. Tools were returned to their places. Fabrics were folded or stored. Chairs and tables remained aligned. Lamps were extinguished or dimmed. The room returned fully to readiness. The sewing or workroom exemplified the Victorian value of quiet diligence. It reflected the idea that even small, repetitive tasks could be performed calmly, without hurry, and with careful attention. Time, in this space, passed gently, producing subtle accomplishment without disruption. Leaving the workroom required no ceremony. The door closed softly. Materials remained where they were placed. The room continued to wait patiently, ready to support the next slow, deliberate activity. This was a room where nothing dramatic happened, yet everything mattered. Each stitch, each fold, each careful motion contributed to a rhythm of order and calm. The sewing or workroom was a sanctuary of quiet labor, where repetition was valued, patience was encouraged, and time moved without urgency. The kitchen was a room of gentle activity, yet it moved in its own quiet rhythm. Unlike the formal or social rooms of the house, the kitchen was alive with purpose, but never with urgency. Its work was essential, steady, and methodical. Meals were prepared, utensils arranged, and ingredients handled with care, all in slow, deliberate motions that respected the stillness of the household. Work surfaces were clean and orderly. Counters and tables were prepared for the day's tasks. Bowls, knives, and pots were placed carefully, each in its designated spot. Nothing was moved without reason, and everything returned to its place after use. The kitchen maintained constant readiness. Light entered softly through windows above the sink or along the walls. Daylight illuminated the surfaces without glare. Shadows moved slowly across counters, cutting gently along shelves, cutting subtly along jars and utensils. In the evening, lamps or gas lights provided a calm glow, enough to work by without disturbing the rest of the house. The kitchen encouraged patience. Every task chopping vegetables, kneading dough, stirring soups was performed in a steady rhythm. Movements were deliberate, measured, and careful. Sounds were minimal. The soft scrape of a knife, the gentle stir of a spoon, the quiet thud of a bowl set down. These were all part of the room's subtle melody. Utensils were organized meticulously. Knives hung in their racks. Spoons and ladles rested neatly in drawers or containers. Pots and pans were stacked carefully, handles facing the same way. Even the smallest items had a place, contributing to the sense of calm. Ingredients were stored systematically. Jars of flour, sugar, and spices were aligned on shelves, labels facing forward. Fresh vegetables or herbs were kept in baskets or on counters, gently arranged for ease of use. Nothing crowded the space or demanded attention beyond its quiet presence. The kitchen was also a room of preparation. Recipes were repeated daily, sometimes with minor variation, but always following familiar procedures. This repetition created a rhythm that guided the cook's movements and supported the household's stability. Children rarely entered the kitchen without supervision. When they did, they were taught to step softly, watch carefully, and avoid interrupting the calm. Even the presence of small hands was integrated into the rhythm, not allowed to disturb it. The kitchen existed in connection to other rooms, but maintained its independence. Doors leading to the dining room or pantry allowed smooth passage. The kitchen remained a private workspace, quietly supporting the household's needs without seeking recognition. Even when the kitchen was empty, it retained its readiness. Countertops were cleared. Utensils remained in place. Light shifted gently across surfaces, and the room waited patiently for its next period of use. Dust settled slowly, unnoticed, as if the room itself were breathing gently. Sound in the kitchen, when present, was never harsh or sudden. Pots clinked softly. Knives scraped on cutting boards. Water moved quietly in bowls or sinks. Even the crackle of the stove or fireplace was measured, controlled, and gentle. Meals were prepared with care, but never rushed. Ingredients were combined slowly, following repeated motions. Stirring, chopping, folding, and mixing all occurred with attention to calm efficiency. The room rewarded care with order and cleanliness. After work concluded, the kitchen returned fully to its resting state. Surfaces were wiped, utensils replaced, and the stove or fireplace left cold or dormant. The room no longer demanded attention. It existed quietly, waiting for the next day's tasks. The kitchen was not a room of excitement, yet it was essential. Its quiet order supported the household's rhythm, providing nourishment and stability. Its calm movements reflected the values of patience, care, and repetition. Leaving the kitchen required no ceremony. The door closed softly. Surfaces remained tidy. Pots, pans, and utensils stayed in their places. The room remained ready, patient, and unchanged. In the kitchen, nothing dramatic occurred, yet everything mattered. Each action was small, deliberate, and steady. The kitchen was a sanctuary of quiet labor, where preparation was performed calmly, rhythmically, and with careful attention to detail. It was a space of gentle order, quietly sustaining the household behind the scenes. The pantry was a room of quiet patience. It existed to hold food and supplies in order, ready for use whenever they were needed. Yet most of the time, it remained still and untouched. Its shelves were lined with jars, cans, and containers, all arranged carefully, each in its designated spot. Nothing in the pantry moved without reason, and even movement was slow and deliberate. Light in the pantry was modest. Small windows, if present, allowed sunlight to filter in. Softly, shadows rested in corners and along the floor. At night, a single lamp provided gentle illumination. The room did not demand brightness. It required only enough light to observe and select. Shelves were high or low, depending on their contents. Heavy jars were placed at lower levels, lighter items higher. Spices, dried fruits, preserved vegetables, and other goods were stored in uniform containers or neatly labeled jars. Each label faced outward, making identification easy without haste. The pantry encouraged order. Items were replaced in the same position after use. Nothing was moved carelessly. Even small changes were corrected immediately, returning the room to its steady, organized state. Sounds were minimal. The soft clink of glass jars, the quiet rustle of paper or cloth, and the gentle thud of items set down were the only noises. These were absorbed by the shelves, floors, and walls, becoming part of the stillness, rather than disrupting it. During the day, the pantry often remained empty. Time passed slowly, unnoticed, while the room held its contents patiently. Dust settled gently on jars and shelves. The room existed quietly, maintaining readiness without attention. Children rarely entered the pantry unsupervised. If they did, they learned to move softly, handle items gently, and return everything to its place. The room itself taught patience and care through repetition and observation. Even when the pantry was used, the pace was measured. Jars were lifted slowly. Items were removed deliberately. Doors opened and closed quietly. Movements were precise and The pantry connected naturally to the kitchen. Items stored here were often retrieved for meal preparation, but the pantry remained a separate, independent space. It held its own quiet rhythm, unaffected by the activity of the kitchen. Arrangements in the pantry were carefully maintained. Heavier, sturdier containers rested at lower levels. Lighter, delicate items were kept higher. Frequently used items were placed for easy access, while rarely used goods remained at the back. Everything had a purpose and a place. The pantry was also a room of observation. One could see the balance of supplies, the repetition of containers, and the orderliness of arrangement. Even without touching anything, there was satisfaction in the calm structure the room provided. At night, the pantry returned fully to stillness. Jars and containers remained untouched. The floor stayed clear. Shelves held their contents without movement. The room waited patiently for the next day, ready to support the household when needed. This quietness was its strength. The pantry required no attention to fulfill its purpose. It existed perfectly by maintaining order, storing supplies, and offering a gentle rhythm of consistency. Even small details mattered. Labels, shapes, sizes, and positions were all considered carefully. Nothing was left to chance. Every container contributed to the sense of calm and order. Leaving the pantry required no ceremony. The door could close softly. Shelves and containers remained exactly as they were. The room continued to exist in patient readiness, untouched and undisturbed. The pantry was a room where nothing dramatic happened, yet everything mattered. The careful placement of jars, the quiet stillness of shelves, and the slow, deliberate pace of any activity created a space of gentle stability. It reminded the household that preparation, order, and patience could exist quietly, without attention or The pantry, in its calm stillness, held its purpose steadily, day after day, ready and waiting for every small, deliberate moment. The conservatory was a room filled with light and quiet patience. It was a place of calm observation, where plants and sunlight coexisted gently. Though it welcomed brightness, it did not invite activity. The conservatory existed to be looked at rather than used, to be entered briefly and then left undisturbed. Tall windows or glass panels surrounded the room, allowing daylight to enter from multiple directions. Light settled softly across the floor, the walls, and the leaves of plants arranged carefully throughout the space. Nothing blocked the light, yet nothing reflected it harshly. Plants were positioned with intention. Large pots rested in corners. Smaller containers lined shelves or stood near windows. Each plant remained in its place, growing slowly, changing gradually, never demanding attention. The conservatory was warm, but not uncomfortable. Heat gathered gently under the glass, creating an atmosphere of stillness. Air moved slowly, often remaining completely still for long periods of time. Furniture in the conservatory was minimal. A small bench or chair might be present, placed for brief rest rather than extended sitting. Tables, if included, held only a few items, such as plant tools or simple decorative objects. The floor was kept clear. There was space to walk slowly, to pause, and to observe. Movement in the conservatory was unheard. Footsteps were light and measured, careful not to disturb the calm. Sound was nearly absent. Occasionally, one might hear the faint rustle of leaves or the subtle creak of the building as it adjusted to temperature changes. These sounds blended into the quiet rather than interrupting it. Watering plants was done slowly and infrequently. Water was poured gently, absorbed into soil without splashing. Pots were adjusted only when necessary and then returned carefully to their positions. The conservatory did not encourage conversation. Voices naturally lowered here, often fading into silence. The room supported quiet presence rather than interaction. Time passed differently in this space. Sunlight moved steadily across the floor, tracing slow paths that marked the hours. Shadows shifted gently, lengthening and shortening without urgency. During much of the day, the conservatory remained empty. Plants continued their slow growth without observation. Light continued to enter and settle. The room existed quietly, fulfilling its purpose without interruption. Children were rarely allowed to linger here. If they entered, they were guided to move carefully, to observe rather than touch. The room itself encouraged restraint through its delicate stillness. The conservatory connected the interior of the house with the outside world, yet it remained enclosed and controlled. Nature was present, but ordered. Growth occurred, but slowly and predictably. Even seasonal changes affected the room gently. Some plants thrived more during certain months. Others rested quietly. These changes occurred gradually, almost unnoticed. At evening, the conservatory changed little. Light soft and faded. Shadows deepened. The room did not require lamps. It accepted darkness calmly, allowing the day to end without ceremony. At night, the conservatory rested fully. Plants remained still. Glass reflected faint moonlight or remained dark. The room existed silently, untouched and undisturbed. The conservatory was not a place where events occurred. It was a place where time slowed and presence was enough. Nothing needed to be done. Nothing needed to be changed. Leaving the conservatory required no adjustment. The door closed softly. Plants remained where they were. Light continued its gentle movement without notice. This room reminded those who entered that stillness could be shared with living things, that growth did not require attention, and that quiet observation was sometimes enough. The conservatory remained patient, filled with light by day and stillness by night, holding its calm presence without expectation, offering a gentle pause within the steady rhythm of the house. The attic was a room where time rested. It existed above the living spaces of the house, separated from daily routines and regular movement. Reaching it required intention. Stairs were climbed slowly, footsteps becoming quieter with each step upward, until the attic revealed itself as a place removed from ordinary life. Light in the attic was limited. Small windows, often placed high along the walls, allowed narrow streams of daylight to enter. This light softened as it traveled across beams and boxers, settling gently on surfaces that had not been touched for long periods. Dust was present, but it was undisturbed. It rested calmly on trunks, shelves, and old furniture. Nothing rushed its settling. The attic accepted dust as part of its stillness, as evidence of time passing quietly. Stored items filled the attic carefully. Wooden trunks sat closed, their contents preserved and unseen. Boxers were stacked neatly, labeled or remembered by habit rather than frequent inspection. Old furniture rested patiently, no longer needed but not discarded. Each object held a past purpose. Chairs that once stood in parlors, lamps that once lit hallways, fabrics folded carefully and wrapped for protection. These items no longer served daily needs, yet they remained present, unchanged. The attic did not invite exploration. Movement was slow and careful. Floors creaked softly underfoot, reminding visitors to step gently. Even sound moved differently here, absorbed by stored objects and wooden beams. Air in the attic felt still. It did not circulate quickly. Warmth gathered during the day and lingered quietly. In cooler hours, the space held a steady chill. The attic accepted temperature without resistance. The roof beams were visible, strong and unmoving. They supported the house silently, performing their function without recognition. Their presence added to the sense of stability and endurance. Items in the attic were arranged with intention, though they were rarely adjusted. Once placed, they remained. Boxers did not shift. Furniture did not move. The room valued preservation over change. Children were seldom allowed to enter the attic alone. When they did, they were instructed to move slowly, not to disturb anything, and to leave items exactly as they found them. The attic demanded respect through its stillness. The smell of the attic was subtle, a mixture of aged wood, stored fabric, and quiet air. It was familiar and constant, never sharp or overwhelming. Time passed, Jenny here. Days, months, and years moved through the attic without altering its arrangement. The room existed outside daily schedules, unaffected by meals, work, or rest. Occasionally, someone entered to retrieve an item. A trunk was opened slowly. Fabric was lifted carefully. The object was removed with consideration, and the attic returned quickly to stillness. Nothing in the attic demanded attention. It did not call out to be used or changed. Its value lay in holding what was no longer needed but not forgotten. Light shifted subtly throughout the day. Morning brightness touched one corner. Afternoon light moved across beams. Evening shadows settled deeply. The attic accepted these changes quietly. At night, the attic became almost entirely dark. Silence deepened. No movement occurred. Stored objects remained exactly as they were, resting within the structure of the house. The attic reminded the household that not everything needed to remain visible. Some things could be stored away, preserved without use, existing simply as part of a larger whole. Even when unseen, the attic contributed to the house's sense of completeness. It held memory without emotion, history without narration. Leaving the attic required no ceremony. The door closed softly. Steps descended slowly. The attic returned to its quiet separation from daily life. The room continued to hold its contents patiently, allowing time to pass without disturbance. It did not change. It did not adapt. It simply remained. In the attic, nothing happened, and that was its purpose. It stored time itself, layered gently in dust, wood, and silence, resting above the house, steady and undefeated. As night settles over the house, everything becomes still. Rooms that were once touched by daylight now rest in darkness or soft lamplight. Curtains are drawn carefully. Doors are closed gently. The house begins its quiet transformation into a place where nothing is required. The hallway, which once carried footsteps, now lies silent. No doors open. No shadows pass along the walls. The space rests, connecting rooms that are all equally calm. The parlor is dark and unchanged. Chairs remain in their precise positions. Tables hold nothing that needs attention. The air feels settled, as though it has stopped moving altogether. The formal sitting room remains untouched, just as it was during the day, its purpose fulfilled by readiness alone. It rests behind its closed door, unchanged and complete. The dining room no longer holds sound or movement. Chairs are aligned. The table is cleared. Light no longer reaches the surface. The room waits quietly for morning, without expectation. The study is still. Papers remain stacked. Pens rest where they were left. Thought has ended for the day, and the room accepts this without resistance. The sewing or workroom has returned fully to order. Tools are stored. Fabrics are folded. Nothing remains unfinished, because nothing is required. The kitchen is silent. Surfaces are clean. Utensils are in place. The room that once supported gentle labor now rests completely. The pantry holds its goods in darkness. Shelves remain steady. Jars do not move. Supplies wait patiently, untouched. Bedrooms are calm and enclosed. Beds are prepared. Lamps are dimmed or extinguished. The rooms offer rest without urgency. Wardrobes and dressing rooms remain closed. Clothing rests exactly where it belongs. No preparation is needed until the next day. The conservatory holds darkness softly. Glass reflects faint moonlight or nothing at all. Plants remain still, growing quietly without attention. Above it all, the attic rests. Stored objects remain undisturbed. Dust settles gently. Time continues to pass without marking change. Outside, the world grows quiet as well. Sound soften, night deepens. The house exists as a complete structure of stillness. No room demands attention. No space calls for movement. Everything is exactly as it should be. The house does not sleep, yet it rests. It holds its shape, its order, and its calm presence through the night. Air moves slowly, barely noticeable. Temperature settles evenly. Silence becomes full and steady. Nothing changes from one moment to the next. Time moves forward without disturbance. This is the purpose of the house at night, to exist without action, to offer shelter without demand, to hold quiet without effort. Each room remains faithful to its role. Each space contributes to the whole by doing nothing at all. The house does not anticipate morning. It does not hurry toward it. Night is accepted fully and patiently. Hours pass. Darkness remains. Stillness deepens. If someone wakes briefly, the house does not respond. It remains unchanged, allowing rest to return easily. The structure holds firm. Walls remain steady. Floors are quiet. Ceilings rest above. There is comfort in knowing that everything is in its place, that nothing needs adjustment, that nothing has been forgotten. The house has completed its cycle for the day. It has held activity, then released it. Now it rests completely. Nothing moves. Nothing speaks. Nothing happens. And in that complete stillness, the house fulfills its final purpose, providing a calm, unchanging presence through the night, allowing sleep to come easily, gently, and without interruption. And as the house grows quiet again, we come to the end of this story. The rooms remain exactly as they were, still, patient, and unchanged. Thank you for spending this time here, and for allowing this calm history to play softly in the background. If you are still awake, I hope this story helped your thoughts slow and your evening feel a little quieter. And if you have already fallen asleep, this video will simply continue resting with you. For those who are new, this channel shares long, gentle history stories designed for sleep, relaxation, and quiet listening. You're always welcome to return anytime you need something calm, familiar, and unhurried. Thank you for listening, and now, the house remains still, and the night continues quietly.